Now I can start. Okay, great. So I am calling the Ad Hoc Sustainability and Resilience Committee of the Common Council. This is a special meeting. Today is June 8th, 2023, and it's just it's 9:02. And we don't have a quorum, but we are going to just start the meeting by having our public participation. So if there's anybody here for public participation, we'll listen to them and we'll vote on our minutes another time.
Okay. We have two participants from the public who've joined and both would like to speak.
Okay,
First
great.
person to speak will be Miss Linnell Jones.
Okay, great. So she should identify herself, give her address, and she has 3 minutes.
Linnell, you have the floor. Linnell, I don't know if you're muted, but we can't hear you.
Oh, I should also note that Darlene Young has joined our meeting.
Good morning.
Hi, Darlene.
Hi, Darlene.
And Jessica Vonacek has also joined our meeting. I'm still not hearing Ms. Jones. Maybe we should go to the other speaker and then we'll go back to Ms. Jones.
Okay. All right. So our second speaker is Miss Diane Laricella.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I guess that my video can't get on. I guess there's no accommodation for that. But thank you for holding this meeting, although most of the public is not able to access it because they're commuting. But the thing is, I'm looking forward to hearing the information about data, of course, and how we interpret the data. I spent quite a bit of time in the last legislative session related to some key issues of housing, making sure housing is in areas where they are free of the threat of pollution as well as flooding. I have been quite involved with trying to build more relationship in the way we do our city planning about the way the environment really is. So I'm pleased we're looking at resilience, of course, sustainability. However, I do think we should, after, if not sooner, widen it to East Norwalk, other parts of South Norwalk, etc. I know, I believe that is your intent, but I do want to say that lastly, that public health data is so important in planning for land use, especially when you have currently the real as-is conditions relating to the location of vast amounts of folks, people that are near illegal contractor yards. Those can be made with enforcement. And I hope there's some enforcement data, because that seems to be one of our weak spots in the city, is enforcement of health and zoning laws related to pollution and related to resilience. So I look forward to listening to this, and I do want to thank you for letting the public speak for this special meeting.
Thank you, Diane. I guess we could try Ms. Jones again, although I don't see her on the list of participants.
Oh, you
Maybe
don't see, you don't see her name? She's
we'll
raised her
try it.
hand again, so.
Oh, she raised, okay.
Let's try this again. We'll try
All
again.
right, one more time.
Okay. Oh, hold on a second. Oh, no. Ms. Jones, can you hear us?
Katie, you unmuted me again, so I don't know what's going on.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh,
Oh, I see. I see her at the list, the bottom of my list now, but her hand is up.
she has permission to speak.
Yep, and she's not muted. So Ms. Jones, try again, please, to speak.
I'm gonna try to remove permission for her to speak and then give her permission.
Okay, great.
That works. Ms. Jones, you have permission to speak. I'm not sure what the trouble is.
I guess what we'll do is, Ms. Jones, if you can accommodate us, what we'll do is we'll allow Brian to go forward with his presentation. Maybe you can Zoom, like, get off and then come back on, and we'll listen to your comments at the end of the meeting. Just because we do have a full agenda and we want to make sure that we give Brian and his team the full amount of time that they need. So if we could ask you to sign out and sign back in, and we promise to reach you at the end of the meeting. So at this time, I will close public comment for this purpose and turn it over to Brian.
Are we on mute?
Yeah, you are.
All right, well, what is it? It's good afternoon for us. Good morning for you all. Nice to see you all. Greetings from Berlin. I'm joined here by the team at DKSR, who was involved in our smart city and data governance assessments that we had talked about a while back. If you recall, this was an offshoot of the sustainability planning work that we were doing. Really wanted to get a jump start on a few initiatives while we were doing the longer term plan. So we engaged DKSR out of Berlin to take a look at our sort of data governance models, and then also help us identify, working with departments, some potential use cases for smart city concepts that could help promote sustainability. And we're pleased to report that today's the day we're going to be reporting out to you in terms of what some of those findings were. It's been a really interesting 4 months of planning with the city departments, department heads, and DKSR here. But really what we want to do is just kind of present the results. A lot of what you would originally been interested in terms of benchmarking has been done with relation to German cities, and there's some really interesting findings that we'll talk about today. But I won't steal Laura's thunder in DKSR, so I'll kick it over to you and we can get started.
Okay, wait, let me remove this from here because I will need the slides. Oops, no, this is not good. There you go.
Yeah, of course, please.
There
do.
you go. Okay.
While you do that, I will mention that Diane Revolus has joined our meeting as well, another council member.
All right, great. So I'm going to start now with this. So as Brian, actually before I start, let me just introduce myself quickly. I am Laura, and yeah, as Brian said, I'm part of the DKSR team, and I had the privilege of working very closely with Brian and his team, also with Carly, the past 4 months in these 2 projects that we did together. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to kind of give you a sneak peek on some of the most important findings we have from these 2 projects. Gonna be very fair and transparent here. It's a very quick overview. We really have a lot of findings, and it was a bit hard for me to prioritize them, Brian. I give you the heads up. So I'm kind of gonna go as fast as I can through them, and of course later on we'll have a part with questions and comments, and we can look back on those things that stand out where you might have some follow-up questions. All right, so bear with me if it's a lot of information. I promise I try to condense it and make it as simple as I can. So first of all, let me just tell you about what we did exactly. So we had, as I said, we had 2 projects, and inside those 2 projects, we had 3 main actions, sort of saying, that we did. So one thing we did was we did what we call a future city viability assessment. What this is we look into the current performance of the city in regards to a smart city and resilient future. And this is something we did based on the Morgenstern City Index. I will tell you a bit more about the index in a minute, how it works, what we did. But this was one core component of our work together, right? Then the second thing we did was we looked into the data governance of Norwalk as a city, so as an organization. We look into the city units, the departments, and we try to assess the current state of data governance, management, and intelligence, so data value for service delivery in the cities. We also provided some recommendations. And then the third part of the assignment was trying to identify and prioritize potential high-value data-based use cases. So how we did all these things is we worked together for 4 months quite intensively, and we had group interviews. We had 2 group interviews with head departments and chiefs officers. We also had a multi-stakeholder workshop, and we managed to come out with 22 identified use cases. So let's start looking into the future city viability assessment, right? So that's the first kind of leg of our work. As I mentioned, we did this using the Morgenstern City Index. This is an index that was developed by the Fraunhofer Institute. For those of you who don't know, I already mentioned that here to the student groups, the Fraunhofer Institute, it's a very large, prominent, important institute of applied research in Germany that also works with innovation. And they have developed this index that basically allows the city to look at its performance and also identify domains where potential improvements could be found. The Morgenstern Index looks into 4 pillars: the livability, resiliency, environment, and innovation. All right. The way we did this is we collected data for 28 indicators, and the index allows you to look at the performance in these pillars. However, it is important to remark that the way the index works is that the performance is benchmarked against 30 German cities. Okay, so let's keep this in mind. The benchmark is 30 German cities. So once we did that, we collected the data, we crunched the numbers, and we got this nice visualization. I made it as big as I could in this slide so that you can see it. But it's a lot of information, right? But I'm gonna just quickly try to help you read this. So we have the 4 pillars here, right? So we have the livability pillars are the red. It's the red part. Resiliency is marked in yellow, environment in green, and innovation in blue. The bars, the color bars, the higher they go, that means the better the performance in that particular indicator, all right? For those indicators that are left blank, so the ones that have no bars at all, it means that the performance was rather low, was rather poor, benchmark against the German cities, all right? So it means that the performance will account to 0% in relation to the other cities, okay? For those where we have the gray color, we had no data, okay? We could not find data for these indicators. So when we look into this, we can see that livability here, we have a lot of long bars. So that will be the pillar where we had the best results, actually. Same goes for resiliency. Those are the 2 pillars with the best performance. And then in terms of environment, we had some missing data, and innovation as well, a bit more of a poor performance in relation to the other cities, okay? Now we could go into a long discussion into each one of these indicators, what it means, but we don't have time for that. We can later go back to it, okay? But just a little overview. So the remarks, I already said it. Some of these livability, resilience, best performance, environment pillar is significantly affected because we could not find data on renewable energy. So share of renewable energy and greenhouse gas emissions for Norwalk, which is already a takeaway of the study, actually. We also found that there are no formal strategies for smart city and digital transformation. Same goes for a formal climate change adaptation strategy. Okay, this also affected the score. And little disclaimer here, we don't claim this index to be entirely representative. In this case, we will need a comparison with US cities to contextualize this result. So this is being benchmarked against German cities. So that would be the first part. And then let's jump into the second leg of the assignment, which was the data governance assessment. So as I mentioned already, we looked into data governance, data management, and added value inside of Norwalk as an organization, right, as in the city. And we tried, so we addressed the questions, I simplified them here, but basically what we were trying to do was to understand the current situation in respects to data governance, what actions there could be for achieving data excellence, where are potential barriers, where are challenges, where there might be low-hanging fruits, and so on. So the way we did this was we actually brought a bunch of heads of departments and chiefs together, and we interviewed them, right? So we found a lot of things out of those interviews, but I extracted two main things. The first thing is that, and I think this is something that we all found quite interesting, we asked the interviewees to kind of make a self-reflection, a self-assessment of the current state of Norwalk as a data-driven organization. Where do they think that it's standing, right? And we asked them to kind of place their perception in this regard in this little graph here, in this little arrow. What you see here is like the stars in yellow represent the chiefs, and the stars in green are the department heads. And we asked them, where do you think you are from? We are only becoming aware of our data and how we can utilize it to, data is a natural part of everyday business, and we have many advanced use cases. And what you see here is that the department heads perceive the maturity level of the city more advanced than those of the chiefs. So the green stars are located a bit ahead. And this disparity could maybe be explained due to the fact that department heads are often more involved in operational activities, so they probably come more in contact to operations and working with the data. And however, it can also be explained to what the two different stakeholder groups understand as a data-driven organization. We have also seen that maybe the chiefs understand data-driven organization more from a strategic point of view. So in this regard, a clear target picture, or what we call a data strategy, could help narrowing this gap and setting long-term goals. Then another little exercise we did was we asked participants to tell us where they would like to see Norwalk's digital transformation in 5 years from now, right? And many things were said. I tried to cluster them around some key takeaways, right, regarding strategy, intelligence, resources, management, use cases, and participation. These were the key points that were mentioned. I think this illustrates nicely also the connection to data, between data and sustainability. And so I highlighted some of the quotes here that I took from the recording. So for example, somebody said that regarding the strategy, that in 5 years, we should have overarching sustainable city goals that are based on data. For example, somebody also said regarding to data management, I hope we are collecting real-time data and integrating it into a platform we choose for high-value solutions. Regarding participation, somebody said that in 5 years, he or she hopes that citizens understand the importance of data when setting the city priorities. And then at last, and tie into our next point now, is regarding use cases. I like this quote. Somebody said, we should have some low budget use cases that we can use for communicating and showing positive effects. So that brings me to my next point, which is, okay, let's find potential use cases. We did this again in a multi-stakeholder group. We brought people together in a workshop, and we first identified some domains where we thought solutions could be particularly relevant for Norwalk. We did this together with Brian and his team, and we defined, okay, let's look into solutions in the domains of environment, mobility, energy, and sustainability. We also had some guiding questions, and then we basically went in together and we brainstormed on the different domains. We identified some use cases. Actually, this is just a small part of everything we identified, because of course I don't have time, but just to name a few. In terms of environment, we talked about smart irrigation, using sensors in tree beds, monitoring pollinator gardens. We talk about a dashboard for green area maintenance in the city. We also talk about heat islands. This also ties a bit nicely with what was just being mentioned about health in the city. Visualizing heat islands to communicate heat risk and health-related messages. Also for planning, for planning cooling stations and so on. We also talk about flood warning, which is also another point that was already mentioned. Kind of considering monitoring the water levels and having digital billboards and warning systems and so on. We then look into mobility and energy, and the topics of smart lights were mentioned. So potentially looking into installing smart lighting in the city and also using the data collected by these devices to understand the usage of the city after dark hours. Then we also talked about e-vehicle charging stations and monitoring for planning the location of new charging stations. Smart parking as well was the topic, monitoring public parking premises, and energy as well. So energy, particularly in public buildings, and here the topic of schools was actually the one we discussed the most, and how maybe a dashboard for visualizing, monitoring, planning, educating, and so on about energy consumption in schools could be useful. And then at last, we talked about, well, sustainability, which is kind of an aggregation of all of these we already mentioned. And we talked about a potential SDG dashboard. SDGs here stands for Sustainable Development Goals. And the idea was, well, how about we kind of try to aggregate data in a sustainability dashboard, and we monitor and visualize different city-related KPIs. There were already some ideas on some data that could be linked to that. There were talks about the planted trees, the e-vehicle charging stations, also health-related data, heat islands, and so on. So, two closing remarks from my side on this. There were many, many ideas for high-value use cases, I find, and a lot of the data sources are already there. Others will need to be added. However, it will be important to choose and prioritize the use cases, keeping in mind a long-term strategy, right? Because otherwise, it's really a lot. And the next thing will be that a first database use case from this list, or maybe something else, could also be used to anchor some of the takeaways from the data governance assessment, and showcase how data can bring added value. And I have here an even better linked data, because as some of you already know, data brings the most value when you actually link it with other data. So, and a dashboard, for example, could be a nice way to start to do this, or different visualizations, different KPIs, and so on. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you. And I think for now we can go into questions, comments. Yes, I'm going to stop now. So, are there any questions?
Well, first of all, I want to say like, this is so amazing to have Norwalk looked at this level. And we're so grateful to the work that you guys have done to take our city and pull it apart and put it back together again with these really important data points. We're really, oh, here's Mr. Livingston. He just joined us post your presentation, but I know he'll be reviewing it on the TV because there's so many things that we wanted to talk about. But interestingly enough, Mr. Livingston and I this morning were taking a walk, doing our little meeting. And one of the things that came up was EV chargers. And can you talk a little bit more about, some of the data that you found around that? Because that's something that we really are trying to dig in. And it seems like it is one of the low hanging fruits, as you kind of was describing. Can you tell us more about what you guys saw with that?
Yeah, what we found there, I'm going to start. You can
Yeah.
also say you were also there, Brian. Well, my main takeaways from the discussion around EV charging were, first, I understand that Norwalk as a city is planning to expand its EV charging infrastructure, as well that there is some form of strategy where you are looking into conversion more towards so transformation towards e-vehicles. The idea that we said was that taking those EV charging points you already have in the city, I understand you already have some, it's not many, but you already have some. And the idea was, how about we start monitoring those to try to understand usage, how much usage we're talking about, what times of the day, and so on, and then use that information to plan better what exactly we will need. We also talked about, because the EV charging solution that actually I presented as an impulse also includes monitoring of not only the EV charging station as such, as infrastructure for charging, but also, as you know, the EV charging station comes together with a parking place, right? So you can park your car. And what we have seen, at least in German cities, is these parking spaces being used for other endings that is not really discharging the vehicle. So people will park their vehicles there and maybe charge a little bit, but then go ahead and further around their day and block the parking station, or even just use the parking place, but not charge at all. So we also talked about that, like if we could monitor that and also get an idea of how, if these charging stations are being used correctly or not, kind of understand behavior of the user around the charging stations that you already have. I don't know if I missed something.
Yeah, no, you got it. Yeah. So I think, Lisa, too, one of the things I'd just like to add, we obviously have a huge opportunity right now with the fact that we're converting a lot of surface parking lots into structured parking. So I think as part of all of these efforts, if we could build the architecture now, so as we rebuild the parking garage at the train station, as we potentially rebuild the parking garage at Webster, we're plugging right into the sort of, right size framework for smart city, sort of for smart parking, smart monitoring, intelligent system management in this regard. So I think we have a great opportunity that we're doing this work now to kind of, create a model that we could adopt across the city as we move forward.
Lisa, you are muted.
Lisa, I think you're muted. Sorry, we can't hear you.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, Tom, do you have any, why you have some experts on EV parking and charging? Do you want to hear some questions you might have? I know that you didn't see the presentation, so you're a little bit at a disadvantage.
Right. No, this is something that I really do want to dive into a little bit more. We are actually convening sort of a working group, Brian. I'll add you to the invite. And I guess next week to sort of try and get ourselves, all the relevant parties together to sort of figure out how to move forward. And I just heard you identify some of the issues we're thinking about. So I'd really like to get your input as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems like a really great use case for some of the things that you're suggesting about. Something else I wanted to know a little bit more about was the energy consumption dashboard for schools. I know that when I visited in Europe recently, people even have like little dashboards in their own homes telling them how they're doing with energy consumption and things like that. So I'm curious to see how something would work bigger on a larger facilities such as a school or city hall or things like that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that might?
Lisa, can I interrupt for a second? When we entered a contract with, I think it was Blue Skies, what it was Green Skies, for some of the schools, they were supposed to put, I don't know if they did, monitoring stations in the schools where we installed solar, so that the kids could see the effect of the solar. And so we're trying to do that in the schools.
No.
Oh, good. So does it exist already or we're
Well, it
not?
was supposed to. I can follow up. I never heard.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see how it's used in Europe. Can you give us a little bit more of a feeling for that, Laura?
Hi, this is Alanos.
Oh,
You can.
Hi, yeah, sorry, you can't see me. Hello, everyone. I'm CEO of DKSR. Pleasure to meet you all. Maybe I can answer your question. In Europe, I guess we're strongly looking at the district scale, or starting to really look at the district scale when it comes to energy consumption. Of course, on an individual building, there are market-ready solutions for that. You basically tap into the data which you get from the smart meters, ideally, if the building is using a smart device, and you visualize that data. But the ultimate goal, of course, is to link that data to, for example, weather forecast, right? And to the solar potential on your roof, in order to understand how you can impact on the electricity consumption in a way that you maximize the renewable energies. At the moment, we're taking this forward with, for example, the city of Munich and Lyon in France and a couple of other cities, where on a district level, you not only monitor the energy consumption, but you actually work with artificial intelligence to balance, so that the district is able to produce more renewable energy than it consumes. We're talking about positive energy districts.
Yeah.
wow, amazing.
And maybe because this is also something that was mentioned, I think it was in the workshop or in one of our meetings, I cannot remember right now. But this use case, I remember we also mentioned in relation to air quality. And we were talking about air quality here today, and that's why it comes to my mind now, because you can also monitor air quality in the school. So it doesn't have to be only energy, you can actually link different data and show different processes, it's not only energy.
Amazing.
Yeah, and Lisa, one thing I just want to add kind of more at the higher level too, and I know we talked about it when we first discussed this engagement. I think, bringing DKSR in has been really valuable in terms of helping us put pieces together. So, as Tom mentioned, you have all these independent projects. So bringing in and having these workshops, we're able to kind of link these pieces. And that's a specialty that they have that's different from, I think, some of the consultants we've worked with in the past. They're actually trying to provide a direct solution and kind of fit our mold around that particular solution, versus consulting us on potential options such as this energy consumption dashboard, or the other thing that I hope to talk about too is the Sustainable Development Goals dashboard, because we really identified it as a very low hanging fruit, under the pretense that what can't be measured can't be improved. And as we have all these data sets that we've identified, if we can work, and we actually have some funding that I think may work for this at the redevelopment agency, to help create that portal, to have that plug and play to whatever we collectively identify as a viable solution, building from this work, but also obviously your interest, the city council and operations perspective. So that's something that we want to, continue the conversation. I think is gonna be a great add-on as a next step to this project.
Do you want to say more about that dashboard while you raised it?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys could prepare something, some of the work you've done might be helpful to start there, and I can talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, sure, of course. Just as Brian was saying, the first thing really is to get a grip on the evidence and to measure the performance in the different areas, and in particular when it comes to the sustainability transition, it's very important to understand the different domains and how they're interlinked, and in order to do that, you need to come up with a dashboard that is able to visualize, some of the KPIs, ideally based on a real world database, ideally, in dynamic data, ideally in real-time data, in order also to show the progress. And that is the first step. So there's various ways how we've been doing it, how other cities in Germany are doing it, where you try to measure on the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. They're like big indicator frameworks, etc., or more lightweighted dashboards, which are, linking some of the indicators to for example, current data about air quality, energy use, waste, etc., pollution, etc. So yes, later on I will be showing some examples, but I think this will be only internally here.
Yeah, we'll pull together some more direct examples. I'm talking about initial scoping with them while I'm here. But I think one thing that's really was interesting also that came out of the study, they asked us for our GHG inventory because obviously and renewable inventory, because we want to monitor that moving forward. We didn't have that data. We don't have that data. So we basically engaged our consulting firm that's doing our sustainability plan to help us actually do a GHG inventory, because what we could do is if we have an online portal, it serves two functions, right? It serves for just performance monitoring in terms of, okay, this is our energy consumption, this is our amount of renewables, this is our GHG, here's our sustainability plan, and that's how it's going to help move the needle moving forward. And we're engaging Caramita to do that. And I think the other sort of value add piece to that is the education piece. And I think if this is a public facing component, it helps people understand how the impact of our decisions can affect the overall sustainability of the city. And it keeps us transparent, it keeps us accountable, which I think will keep this at the forefront of our discussions from an operations perspective.
Totally makes sense. It looks like Ms. Revoluz has a question. So, there you go.
Good
Diane.
morning, guys. I'm sorry. This is actually great. Excuse my background singer. I just I just wanted to ask something more as on like a devil's advocate frame, but don't hear me wrong. This is not bad. It's not. I just asking on a devil's advocate plane. Okay. That being said, for example, we're talking about the data we're collecting, and in particularly with sustainability, equity is part of that, right? So if you're talking about like energy and you're talking about monitoring our energy consumptions in these parking spaces and charging, and we're collecting data, but not collecting data on like the cons of it all, right? Like, for example, we're talking about Russia and Germany, I'm sorry, and we're talking about, well, say in Europe, but like, do we literally never talk about the effects of it on Africa and what actually causes the help of actually making this happen, which is a human rights issue, right? Then you get right back into Norwalk. Who can afford this? And a lot of data collection happens on the backs of people who then won't get the equities to the data collected. I'm only stating this because I think we collect data in a space and place of true owners, but in the way we want to go, but not looking at where it can derail other people and where we're going. So is that a point in your collecting on that? How will this affect your lower hanging fruit in a negative connotation, if that makes sense? And again, it doesn't have to be showcased. It's just that's a part of data collection to me that actually ends up undermining the people that will be displaced by certain things we do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. So, okay, so yeah, and I appreciate the question. So one of the things, and Diana, I might not have mentioned it too, but we're here with a student group that I'm leading, and our big focus right now is sustainability.
Yeah,
and we just left a lecture yesterday talking about equity, and so how to use data to help improve the conditions that you're talking about and monitor them in certain ways. And I think the best answer that I could give you in this regard as it relates directly to this study is, as we look at these smart city use cases, we're really trying to use data to improve sustainability through resource efficiency. And once we achieve that resource efficiency, what that does is it allows us to free up additional resources to help with the projects that you and I have been working on with District B or MLK and the like, to sort of have a balanced approach to the work, the investments that we're making, and then direct benefit to the lower income populations of Norwalk. And I think that the easiest way I could, term I could say is just reiterate resource efficiency and helping us, generate additional resources for the other projects that we've been working on in South Norwalk and other lower income parts of the city.
And I appreciate you saying that. I just don't, and I mean that, yes, for South Norwalk, but I mean that overall, because at the end of, and yes, because I'm not normally on this committee, and thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. It's just the fact that what came up to me, like if we were talking about if we're like our uses, well then normally in sustainability, what is our usage on the energy grid comparing to a national state versus, it's just like what we actually pay attention to towards that sustainability. That's an overall for all of us, not only South Norwalk, although I speak heavily for South Norwalk. But I just think intrinsically, a lot of this becomes a place and space where it becomes a divide of a, if you can or if you can't. And that's the kind of data collection I'm trying to see that sustains a whole of all can, if that makes sense. But everything's perfect. I just wanted to speak it, and I apologize if it's been addressed earlier.
Thanks, Diana.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things, right, that we're concerned about is like when I look at your identified uses, we're looking at smart irrigation, heat islands and flood warning. And from the work we've been doing in South Norwalk, heat islands and floods are major concerns. So to the extent that we're trying to ameliorate some of those issues, I feel like we are addressing some of the DEI questions and the fairness questions regarding the environment, which are disproportionately visited upon some of our lower income people in places where they have difficulty moving away from these issues. Is there some thought about that, Brian?
Yeah, this was mentioned as well. So equity and environmental justice when planning the city as well in terms of heat and health, and how understanding heat islands and the different temperatures in the city can also help identifying, I don't know, measures or interventions, or even educating citizens in regard to, the heat, basically. This was definitely mentioned, I remember.
Yeah, I think, the sort of fruit, the cream that rose to the top during our discussions was really around that sort of environmental management. And it came a lot from, the Parks Department, DPW, around smart irrigation, obviously mobility, smart parking, EV charging, and then measuring our progress from an operational perspective under this SDG dashboard. I think these are three very good things that we should start investing in and continuing the discussion around, because there's obviously demand, and it has a sustainability benefit on economic, environmental, and equity-based, levels.
Yeah, I mean, they all connect, and like actually you could take KPIs from all of these domains and connect them to an SDG dashboard, because this is all relevant to sustainable development goals, or however you want to frame your dashboard. It doesn't have to be a sustainable development goal dashboard. You can say an environmental dashboard, or each city decides what is the best fit for you, right? But I think for me, at least, the takeaway was like the data that we know we have for all of these use cases, or all the 22 use cases we identified. Not all of that data, but a good portion of it will be also relevant for a potential, for example, an SDG dashboard. Like of course, you will have to have an internal discussion. What is it that you consider an important KPI for you? What makes sense for you to measure? It's not that you're gonna go out there and just measure out of the sake of measuring, right? But really think, what is it that you want to understand, where you think it makes sense to go in, and then based on that, you could create KPIs, and then think, okay, what is the best way to assess this KPI? Do we need dynamic data for this? Do we need to visualize it also with historical data? How is it? Who does it need to see this? Is it just us? Is it the city internally? Is it for the planning? Is it for the citizens? And then once you go into this, this allows you to really look into the KPIs, and of course you will have KPIs that relate to all these domains. You will have KPIs that relate to green areas, and then once you look into green areas, maybe smart irrigation, maybe sensors, and I don't know, like you mentioned a lot. I remember in the workshop the topic of tree planting was mentioned a lot, and how you are planting trees in the cities, and you are making investment in this, and you're planning to have a lot of tree planting in the next years, for example. So you could maybe think, okay, do we want to have a KPI that relates to tree plantings? And I don't know, do we want to look into this also as a way to protect our investment, for example? And then we could think about that. But long story short, the dashboard and sustainability dashboard will have to really be adapted to what you as a city consider important for you to be sustainable.
Right.
It won't be the same for every city.
And I think it's really helpful in terms of timing, you know, as we talked about from building off what Laura just said, we're doing our sustainability plan concurrent to this. And a key tenet of that is we want an organizational framework in order to implement the ultimate recommendations. We're able to continue this work along, you know, concurrent with it, developing this dashboard. We'll have that ability to identify those key performance indicators through that discussion and monitor our progress. Once we get this list of implementation projects from sustainability, that's going to lower our GHG emissions or whatever the KPI is, and then we'll have something to monitor our performance moving forward. I think the one thing that's also the value out of these workshops is it showed every department across the city and it exposed them to a sort of methods and a mindset to integrate sustainability and resilience into their daily workflows. And I think that is where the real power is. If we can harness these little morsels in everyone's department and everyone's work from planning, building, education and public safety, whatever it is, we're going to be able to continue that discussion. And these two pieces of the smart city is really helpful for the implementation of our sustainability and resilience plan that we're developing. So I think they're working very nicely together, just sort of reporting that out.
Yeah, and I think that that's one thing just to reiterate, because we're all doing this in one place, to talk about that the fact that is our plan really is our sustainability plans really focused internally on our city functions. And that was a conscious choice because we felt like we couldn't really take care of the city until we took care of our internal functions. It was Brian's leadership to make that decision. And Brian, just also because we're kind of making a public record on it, can you just tell people a little bit more about the GHG thing that we're doing, the monitoring of that, just because people who are paying attention to this might have missed it at other meetings?
Yeah, so when we were doing this smart city needs assessment, as the Morgenstern index that you saw, it showed we don't have a GHG inventory nor much data on renewables, and we've really dug deep to try to find it in terms of Eversource, SNU. Well, Carly here too. I have to make sure that Carly gets the credit. Carly dug very deep in terms of trying to help me find it out. But what we identified is, the GHG inventory is going to be very important for us because it gives us a benchmark to evaluate our progress. So what we did is we reached out, our consultant, SLR has a sub, Caramita, who specializes in this. So we reached out to them to get an estimate and a quote to add that into our study, into the sustainability and resilience plan that we're developing. So we hope to engage that firm. There's some internal discussions I know that still need to occur from a financial resource perspective, but right now, which would be perfect timing. So what we'll be able to do is we're at the gap analysis stage. We're doing these focus groups with you this week. We just had one on Monday. We're doing another set. Is to basically get that data now so that when we develop our list of implementation projects, they can actually model the effects of them and show us where we're heading, which is the perfect thing to integrate into sort of an SDG dashboard, so that we have some sort of community-wide, vision and metric and how we're evaluating ourselves and keeping ourselves transparent, accountable, and honest.
Yep, the timing does seem exactly perfect. So it's 10 of 10, and I promise everybody we'd be off shortly before 10. Is there any other committee members who had a question or comment about any of this work? And before we thank you guys for this amazing presentation. Darlene.
Good morning. I just want to say, thank you to Brian Bedoli, who continuously keeps it interesting, innovative, and just thinking about how we can do things differently. And I think as a city, that's how you move forward in a really positive and progressive way, and bringing as many minds to the table as you have sitting around that table with you. We appreciate all of the work that you put in. And as Ms. Shanahan said, this is going to definitely be something that we can utilize moving forward in a positive way and productive way for the city. So kudos again, Mr. Bedoli, and to this committee, and to you, Lisa, for your leadership and keeping this to the forefront for the city. Appreciate it.
I just follow Brian around like a little baby duck.
Well, I do too. I try, but not let him see me. So,
Barbara, do you have something to say as well?
I couldn't say it better than Darlene just did, but I just have to throw my voice in there too. Brian, you're just doing an incredible job. And I'd just like to thank the whole team in Berlin there, because, we've long known that you are so far ahead of us in this arena, and just, really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. And before we end it, I just want to mention real quick, I know Tom and I know Lisa, but all these people behind here are like a class that I'm hosting here in Berlin. And say hello, yeah. And we basically have harnessed their brains for the next month here. So what the idea is that they're here to observe this conversation, hear your priorities. And their final project is going to be taking all of this data. So the smart city stuff that DKSR does, also the literature review and gap analysis that SLR has been doing. And then they're going to try to find ways to help us implement that through the Webster Lot project. So
Oh my gosh.
together.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. It's good. We can't wait to see what you come up with. We're really excited and thrilled and very grateful for the time and effort you're putting in on our city across the pond. We really appreciate it. Well, we're going to close this portion of the program. And then we have to take, I think, if we can get Ms. Jones back up, because we promised her a public comment of 3 minutes. But nobody closes a meeting better than Barbara and Darlene is saying thanks. Oh, it looks like Mr. Livingston has one.
Yeah,
more.
I just wonder if I can get a copy or the presentation will be available. You're sending that around.
Yes,
Yeah,
we can
we'll-
send it around. We also recorded the presentation.
Yeah, and
So
that's helpful. I might get the thing I see on screen too. That'd be great. Thank you.
yeah, it'd be great to have the PowerPoint as well as the video. That would be great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, we'll send it
Good.
out.
Amazing job, Laura.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so if you can, Katie, if you can bring back Ms. Jones,
Yeah.
we'll try it one more time.
Yeah,
And then we'll close
okay.
the- And she is still muted, I see, Ms. Jones.
Ms. Jones, you've been given permission to speak, but you are muted. So you have to unmute yourself here.
Still muted. Gosh, it just does not seem to be working.
No.
Ms. Jones, we're so sorry. If you would like to submit your comments by email, we'll attach it to the minutes of this meeting. I don't know why we're having trouble getting you on the record. We're very sorry, but we can even read your comments at the next meeting if we'll give you a little bit of extra time to make your comments at the next meeting if you have comments about the next meeting as well. Alrighty, well, unfortunately, I guess we can't get Ms. Jones on, but I don't even think we have a quorum to have a motion to to adjourn. So I'll just say, well, we're going to adjourn. And thank you everybody for joining us today during the middle of the day, and especially to the Germany team.
Thanks,
All right.
bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, everybody.